Hi, my name's Kate Warren. I'm an assistant curator here at the Australian Centre for the Moving Image. I'm sitting here today with Ron Magliozzi and Jenny He from the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Ron and Jenny are the curators of the Tim Burton exhibition, which is currently on display here at ACMI, and they've agreed to speak with us today about their experiences curating the exhibition and working with Tim Burton and some of the artists. Ron and Jenny, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
It's great to be here.
So, Ron, if I could start with you maybe. The Tim Burton exhibition is such a major retrospective exhibition and it has more than 700 pieces of artworks and objects in it. How did the idea for it come about and develop?
The idea came about because the museum has been doing gallery exhibitions, Museum of Modern Art, since 1939. We've done 80 or 90 of them. And we traditionally did them in a smaller gallery space. You know, our major galleries are the theaters where we show the films, but we had a small exhibition space. In 2004, the museum opened a big new building with lots of public space, like your building here, with lots of more options for exhibitions. And they asked us to begin doing our exhibitions on a larger scale. Pixar was the first exhibition that we curated for the space on a larger scale. And as you know, that was a big hit. I know it came here. And they said, what could you do next? What could top Pixar? And Tim Burton came to mind fairly quickly. I mean, actually, while we were organizing Pixar, Tim Burton came to mind, partly because, you know, Tim had been to Cal Arts and he'd worked with John Lasseter, and Pixar was so CGI, computer generated, and Tim was the other side of things. He was the hands-on stop motion. He seemed the perfect subject, and Pixar was a studio show. Tim would be a monographic show. That was very exciting. And the rest is history.
And Jenny, when you first approached Tim Burton with this idea, what was his initial reaction?
Well, we spoke to Tim's agents, we spoke to Tim's producer and his assistant, and but we hadn't spoken to Tim face-to-face until we visited his archive in London. And I still remember the first visit. You know, we were led up to his studio, and it was Arthur Rackham's studio, actually. So we were in this kind of open, airy space in the middle of London, and we started presenting our exhibition proposal to Tim. And, you know, we were talking about Pixar, of course. He went to school with John Lasseter, as Ron said. And he just, you know, just his enthusiasm for our ideas was so infectious that, you know, we immediately wanted to jump into his archive and started looking through the works. I mean, his work was all around us as we're having this meeting. So from that point on, Tim has been such a great collaborator, and of course his art speaks for itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Tim Burton that you see in interviews is the Tim Burton that we experienced. There's no other Tim Burton. I mean, Tim Burton is pretty much himself. When you with him one-to-one, it's special, and it was special for us. He came from behind his desk. He pulled his chair up beside the desk and leaned over towards us, so like we are here now, really, and listened intently. And when we said something about black light or about 3D, he got very excited about it. And from there it was let them have access to anything they want to see. One day he said, let them wander through my home while I'm away for the weekend in case they find something they liked. That was a really exciting experience and privilege. But that's how down to earth he was. He was concerned we were having lunch, whether our hotel room was comfortable enough. I mean, that kind of one-on-one personal interest in us was surprising.
And very open with his artworks and his ideas, obviously, and to inviting someone new into his world is really...
Yeah, and we felt a great sense of privilege. We were opening boxes that people had not opened outside his, you know, his archivist, looking at stuff for the first time, and there was no censorship involved in it. We looked at everything, box after box, every plan. We were left alone in his archive to pull open the drawers and look at the art ourselves and to take notes and photographs. So we pinched ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I just have to second that. It's been such an honor and privilege to be able to be allowed into this, you know, very personal part of Tim's work. The Tim Burton that everyone knows, you know, is the Tim Burton, the filmmaker. His films is his public persona, and yet we were allowed into his archive full of personal and unrealized projects that, were perhaps never intended to be viewed publicly. And you would have to ask Tim why he allowed us into his archive, but we were lucky. We were extraordinarily lucky to be able to bring this to such a public arena.
Absolutely. Well, Ron, you've touched on my next question a little bit, talking about Tim's archive himself, but of course many of the works also come from the collections of Tim's collaborators and film studio archives as well. Can you tell us a bit about the process of researching these different kinds of collections and how you selected some of the artworks for the final exhibition?
Sure. When we started with the exhibition, we had the notion of tracing Tim's creative imagination from childhood to adulthood, which is not a particularly sophisticated premise. It's a basic one. It would apply to any retrospective you were doing. And we thought at the time that most of what we expected to find, we would find in the studio archives. We assumed that Disney and Warner's and Fox would have the material that we were looking for. We didn't realize that Tim had so much material in his own personal archive, something like 10,000 pieces. So we spent a lot of time in the studio archives as well. We went through the Disney Animation Research Library, went to the Disney Corporate Archive, looking at art, and we went to the Warner's Archive, which is in a big warehouse in Burbank, which is full of large-scale, 10 Batmobiles in a row. And they basically gave us a large section of the warehouse floor and opened these crates. So there it would be a couple, half a dozen crates broken open, the props from Pee-wee's Big Adventure falling out of them. There was a whole section of Martian parts and Martian body parts from Mars Attacks. Sweeney Todd material, mirrors and props and weapons, that sort of thing. We once again spent days looking at things, and we were looking. We had identified the visual motifs in Tim's work that we were interested in looking for. If you don't go in with some sense of what you're looking for, you're like, it's just like a kid in a candy store where you just run around playing with all the props, which I must admit I did. There's a photograph of me with a Martian ray gun to my head. But we did have a serious intent in going in, knowing what we were looking for in terms of, the motifs of his work, the masking and body modification. So when we looked at the Martians, the Martian body parts and stuff, we selected very carefully.
Yeah, it was very helpful to spend all that time in Burbank, California, because as you know, Tim grew up kind of under the shadows of Disney and Warner, and the fact that we went to these studios and saw all the archival works that Tim had produced from his film projects. It was just really helpful to kind of get into that mindset, to be in this valley, to be driving around in the sunshine and then going into these studios and seeing experiencing firsthand what Tim must have experienced growing up. Yeah. And then, of course, we were surprised with a lot of the works that we found. At Fox, we saw all those great concept drawings for Planet of the Apes, which is a film that you wouldn't expect would have intricate concept work. And of course, you see some of this in the exhibition. So it was great to be able to see Tim's collaborators and their work, as well as Tim's own personal works.
And I suppose in that process you can see the development of his creative work from his initial drawings to how he communicates that to his collaborators as well, which you see in the exhibition as well.
Yeah.
Going in with the idea that a lot of the show would be coming from the studio archives, and then when we saw how much Tim had, we realized, no, this is going to be a little bit different. This is a dream come true, to have an artist that creates so much work off screen, because not all the work that he creates is for his films. Tim's always creating. He needs a creative outlet, so there are Polaroids in the exhibition here. There are some drawings and paintings that he did just to exercise his own imagination, as I always like to say. And you see the same motifs in this art that you see in the films. That was very exciting to us, and we were able to do a little bit less from the studio loans, to be very careful in how we chose things. And for instance, to choose costumes from, say, Batman and Batman Returns that were non-heroic versions. You'll notice in the exhibition that you don't see a very proud Batman cowl or a very highly polished Catwoman suit. We wanted, knowing that his motifs of skin and shed skin and armoring, we selected things that represented that aspect of his imagination, and we were able to fine-tune it. And the archivists at these studios are incredibly generous, and everyone loves Tim. The people at Warner's loved Tim, the people at Fox loved Tim, the people at Disney loved Tim. So it made our job really a joyous experience, I have to say.
Jenny, you mentioned just briefly Burbank very quickly, and you've used Burbank as a structuring device throughout the exhibition. Can you tell us a bit about why you chose to do that and how Tim's relationship to Burbank informed that as well?
Sure. The exhibition is divided into roughly 3 sections around Tim's narrative, surviving Burbank, his childhood growing up, beautifying Burbank, his time at CalArts, and as an apprentice animator at Disney, and then beyond Burbank, which is his feature film work from Pee-wee's Big Adventure in 1985 on. And what we found surprising is the fact that beautifying Burbank, the middle section, is actually where this exhibition is kind of centered around, because it was really at CalArts and his time at Disney where Tim developed a lot of his motifs, where he honed his signature styles. And these works were the works that no one had known, from unrealized projects that were never greenlit, were never made into films or fully realized. And yet it's from these unrealized projects where you see the foundation of Tim's motifs that you find later on in his feature films. And of course, Disney has been so significant in Tim's career, and the fact that he kind of had all this secret, hidden work while he was at Disney. It just kind of solidified the entire exhibition for us, the discovery of these unrealized projects. So we wanted, and the fact that Disney was in Burbank, CalArts is in Valencia, so we wanted to kind of center his California life around his works.
Obviously, it's a very strong influence and you're right, you do see those motifs very early kind of recurring in many of his films.
Yeah, you see them in the drawings. I know people visited the exhibition should look for the Burbank, I call it the Burbank motif, the houses, the little rows of houses, and that you see repeatedly. The suburban lifestyle, which you see in Edward Scissorhands, and you'll see in a thing called Trick or Treat. When he couldn't make Trick or Treat, he used some of the visual ideas in Edward Scissorhands. And I even think of Nightmare Before Christmas as being a kind of Burbank escape fantasy. I mean, Jack in Halloween Town is Tim in Burbank. Tim, bored with that life and looking for some other world, and finding Christmas Town, finding a different kind of colorful world, and merging the two.
So, Ron, the exhibition at MoMA has been amazingly successful, and you had more than 800,000 people come through. How do you explain that?
Tim is a rock star. That's one as you'll see here very shortly in Melbourne. He appeals to a mass audience. I mean, there are a number of audiences that come to Tim's work. There's the family audience that comes and they own Tim. There's this aspect of Tim's work that clicks with them. And then there's a cult audience. We're going to call it a punk audience, a goth audience, a cult audience that sees something else in Tim, and there's a Tim that belongs to them. And so you get both those audiences. You get a young audience and an older audience, and which is partly because Tim's work is all about childhood and adulthood, those relationship between childhood and adulthood, how adults, the child in adults and the adult that's in children. It's not just the relationship between children and their parents. It's that. I think that's really what it is. And Tim, although Tim takes you to dark places, ultimately he's optimistic, so people come out feeling joyous. I mean, there are creepy things in Tim's work, but there's an optimistic optimism to it that comes, I believe, from his resort to creativity. I mean, there's such a creative energy in his work that inspires people. So I think that's what it is. I think people think of Tim as being theirs, having a personal relationship with his work.
I remember I read a quote from Helena Bonham Carter, and she said that Tim is the most understood, misunderstood person in the world, and it seems to be very apt. What were some of the reactions from visitors that you had to the exhibition?
Oh, one of my guilty pleasures during the duration of the show at MoMA is to go down during public hours and kind of eavesdrop on visitors. And just the comments that I heard were so amazing. People said, I could spend hours looking at, each drawing, or, they would tell their friends to come here and look at this specific one. And people were so engaged with each work. As you've said, there are almost 700 works in the show, and the audience was engaged with almost each and every single one, because Tim's themes are so universal, and they are very specifically Burton-esque, the motifs that recur and certain styles that you see, you instantly recognize as Tim Burton. Yeah. However, what he touches upon, everybody has felt alienated at some point. Even the popular jock in high school feels kind of misunderstood as well. So he touches upon all of these themes that are kind of inherent in everyone. So, but each person has a specific attachment to different works. And I've asked a lot of people, what is your favorite Tim Burton film? And almost everyone comes up with a different film. One person might be attached to Edward Scissorhands, and another person would be attached to Ed Wood. And yet, within all of these feature films, you have these unifying themes that everyone can respond to.
Yeah, my favorite encounter in the galleries that I had was a dad and his two sons debating the Mars attacks. The dad liked the film, and the kids didn't like the film. The kids loved the puppets and the other parts of that are in the exhibition, but they didn't like the film, and the dad was trying to convince them of its merits. And of course, that's somewhat a more adult film. I mean, that's I've been heard from some of Tim's people that work with Tim, and it's most like Tim. Mars Attacks is most like Tim's sense of humor. I like it because it's a kind of pop surrealist Tim. That side of it's the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the bright, colorful Tim. But it's the most politically edgy of the films. I mean, he's commenting on media and the military and all that kind of thing. So you can see why the kids wouldn't quite get it the same way. Yeah. But the Martians they loved. So there was this whole thing with the dad trying to get the kids to appreciate certain values in the film, and that was. I like that very much, because that was the demonstration of what Tim's work is about, really.
Well, some of his films you can come back to, can't you? When you're older, you encounter them when you're young, and then, like Mars Attacks in particular, is a great example of how you can re-appreciate it when you're older and a bit wiser as well.
Yeah, Tim often says that what parents find frightening, children don't find frightening at all. And actually, during one of the times I was in the gallery, there's a little child saying to his father, "Oh, I want Jack Skellington, Dad. It's not scary at all." And the parent just said, "No, it's too scary for you." And yet, the child is right there saying, "Not at all." And it's just right there. That solidified, that moment for me.
Yeah. Jenny, have you enjoyed seeing your exhibition come to international venues like ACMI?
Oh yeah, I mean, just walking around today is just it's amazing seeing kind of a different, seeing it transform in another venue. And I was just saying earlier, it's like seeing your children study abroad and having a new experience. And I'm so glad that we're able to bring it to Australia and have a different audience appreciate it. We had such an international audience at MoMA that it just felt right to see it travel the world. And
yeah, an exhibition can look very different. Every venue does a different interpretation of it. It's something the average museum goer might not realize. I mean, if you go to multiple museums, I mean, if anyone has a chance to follow this show, we will, luckily we'll be following it as it continues its tour onto Canada, to see how it changes, how the same work can be presented in a different way, And you're presenting it here at ACMI in a much more interactive way than we did at the museum, which was a more formal museum exhibition. So this is very exciting. I'm kind of proud that we selected works that worked in different ways. And it's been, as Jenny said, I second Jenny's, it's just exciting to see how some of it is and yet how dissimilar it is, really.
Oh, well, we're so excited to have it here, and so glad that you could, come and see it as well. One final question for each of you. Maybe start with Ron, but if you could each pick one item or one piece from the exhibition to take home with you once it finishes its tour, what would it be and why?
I can't pick one, I can pick three.
Okay.
I'll do it quickly. Because one's media. Jenny should get a media piece. My favorite piece is the Hansel and Gretel. I'm very proud that we rescued Hansel and Gretel from oblivion in a way. I mean, it's a film that bloggers thought maybe didn't even exist because no one had seen it since 1983. It was only shown once. To have found that and to have been able to restore it, I'm very pleased with that, since there was so much art in Tim's archive, a huge amount of art in Tim's archive. To bring the art and that piece back together, I'm very proud of that, and I love the piece. There's so much of Tim in it, and it's so early. And if the drawings, I love the simplest drawings. I mean, there's a drawing in the couples section. You get the men drawings and the women, and there's the couples. There's a very delicate pencil drawing with a couple that's dancing or wrestling, you can't tell which. And you look at it the first time and you went, is this just a blob? Is it one person? Do you realize it's two people, a man and a woman in an embrace? I love that piece. And also the piece you have on the catalog cover. Voodoo Girl and embracing the character is just that piece that really speaks to me about Tim. It's charming and cute. It's also poignant.
Don't tell Tim this piece disappears at the end of the tour, but my favorite work is the painting that depicts the last of its kind, that little character, which is just so simple. It's, 3 circles on spindly legs, and, it uses grays and whites and a giant red spiral, becoming an arrow. And this little creature is just kind of relegated to the corner of the frame, and it communicates so much to me in terms of Tim's themes, this kind of lonely, the last of its kind creature, and I don't know, I just identify with it, and I think that it's an example of how, audience members just identify with certain of Tim's characters, and it just stays with you.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to predict, but obvious, as you say, there's so much in the exhibition that resonates very strongly with people. So it's wonderful to have it here at ACMI. We're so excited. Thank you both so much for your time today, for taking time out of your schedules to come and talk with us. It's been great. And I hope that you've also enjoyed listening to these fascinating insights from Ron Magliozzi and Jenny He about Tim Burton the exhibition currently on display at ACMI. Thank you.